Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad.
So we are up to episode number 23. Let's jump right in. We can talk about what we're driving. And I think you're having more fun than I had this week. So you are... Well, you know what? I'm not going to ruin it. You go ahead and tell us what you're driving, Sam.
I have been driving since last Thursday morning the Fiat 124 Spider Abarth, which is... I would say it's not unreasonable to call this so far perhaps the ultimate expression of the Mazda Miata.
Those are strong words because like those two camps, like the Fiat and the Miata camp, are kind of a little bit factionalized.
Yeah, well, for the most part, the modern 124 that launched last year is effectively a Miata. It's built by Mazda in Hiroshima. When Fiat Chrysler and Mazda first got together and started talking about doing this project, it was originally intended to be a new Alpha Spider. So they were going to do an Alpha variant of the Miata with an Italian engine in it. And Sergio Marchionne decided that he was not going to have any Alfa Romeos built outside of Italy. And the deal with Mazda was specifically that the car would be built in Japan alongside the Miatas. So they ultimately rebadged this as a Fiat and gave it some styling cues that are vaguely reminiscent of the old 124 Spider that ran from the late 1960s until about the mid 1980s. But this is it's a very different car, and it has all of the attributes that make people love Miatas. It's fairly lightweight and nimble and compact, but it's got the advantage of the engine that's in this car. They're using the Fiat 1.4 liter turbo, multi-air turbo, which is the same engine that you'll find in the Fiat 500 Abarth. In the case of the Abarth version, the standard version of the 124 gets 160 horsepower and 184 foot-pounds of torque. And if you get the Abarth, it has a different exhaust that gives you an extra 4 horsepower. Not really noticeable from what I've heard from others that have driven the standard version, but it's plenty. And the key difference there is the low end torque you get from this turbo engine versus the naturally aspirated 2 liter that's in the Miata. And
that's what people have always complained for the most part about Miatas, is that they're not overpowered, they're not underpowered, they're sort of like just right powered,
Exactly.
And, with the power delivery too, with the turbo, I'm sure it's a lot different driving a Miata based car that has that low end torque that the turbo is going to have.
Right. And, at 164 horsepower, by modern standards, this is by no means an overpowered car, and 184 foot-pounds of torque is, I think, it's just right, for a car that weighs just over 2,400 pounds. I think it's perfect. It's beautifully balanced, and it's just a hoot to drive. From the outside, it looks distinctly different from the Miata. As I said, it's got a few cues, kind of in the grille and the headlights of the old 124 Spiders, but the proportions are quite different from those old Fiat Spiders. It's got a much longer hood to cab ratio. The cab is set further back. This one has more of the classic roadster proportions. Long hood, the cabin set towards the back of the car. And very similar to a Miata, but it's because of the bodywork, it's got a little bit more overhang at the front and the rear, so it's actually about 5 inches longer, even though it's riding on the same wheelbase. So it's a little bit more muscular look to it. I'd say, than the Miata. The Mazda is, perhaps a little more. I don't want to say delicate. I don't think that's quite the right word for it. That was the word
I was thinking, though. The Mazda is definitely. So I guess this is sort of my question as we talk about it too. Is do you think that they've successfully turned the Miata into a car that's reminiscent of, or at least just that can stand on its own? I every now and then I'll look at the Spider and I'll think, oh, that looks really good, and then other times I'll look at it and go, oh, they tried a little too hard for the retro. So, where do you come down?
It's grown on me over the past 5 days. I like it a lot more than I did before I got to drive it. And maybe it's just the fun I'm having driving it has tainted my opinion of the visuals. Up until recently, I always thought the Miata was the better looking car, and I think it's probably still overall the better looking car. But I've grown to really like the Fiat version. And it's funny. I was thinking as I started to noodle around with what I'm going to write for the review of this thing, thinking back over the last 25 years now, from the late 1980s up through 2007, just before the crash, the financial crash, Chrysler did an incredible series of concept cars over, the span of about, almost 20 years.
Oh yeah. I remember
they did multiple concepts every year. And, most of those never made it to production aside from the Viper and the Plymouth Prowler. But among those, that string of concept cars, there were at least 3 little Dodge sports cars: the Copperhead from I think 1997, the Razor from 2002, and the Demon was the last one in 2007. And it's funny, that Demon, each one of those, was a small 2-seat sports car, very reminiscent of Miata, clearly designed. If they were going to produce them, it's clearly, directly aimed at the Miata customer. And, especially the Demon, and if they had built the Demon, it's funny, that car with that name is like the antithesis of the car that was just introduced at the New York Auto Show with the same name. It's a little 2-seat 4-cylinder sports car. And none of those cars that were meant to challenge the Miata ever made it to production until now. You have a car from, the successor company that was actually built by Mazda. But using a Fiat powertrain.
They're probably really smart to do that. I think what killed those earlier cars is I'm sure there's a variety of things, but one of the difficulties with a car like that is just making the business case for it. And, you saw GM try sort of the same thing with the Saturn Sky and
the Solstice.
Pontiac Solstice and the whatever Opel it was.
I think the Opel was the Speedster.
Yeah. Really neat looking car, definitely plucked from the show circuit and put into production, but
not well executed.
No, it was definitely built to a cost. It was a neat car, but it felt like a kit car. And that's essentially what it was. And what impressed me the most about that was just sort of how they mashed a bunch of stuff from the parts bin together and made essentially this sort of like Neo C3 Corvette. But I'm sure they lost money on every single one of them. And Chrysler never had the largesse of GM. So just to think that would happen, especially coming on the heels of something like the Prowler that I'm sure they sort of took a bath on.
Yeah.
That just wasn't going to be a thing. And it sucked because there was stuff like the Copperhead was just so neat. And even the Demon concept car, they were just, you'd love to have them. They would not have saved the company from any dire straits. At that point, what they really needed were good, solid middle of the road products, and less debt and stuff. A whole lot of other businessy things, but they're certainly smart to tie up with Mazda, who's kind of happy to have a partner, I'm sure, buying up some of their cars and
oh yeah, absolutely.
Cost.
Take some of the production capacity and help amortize the tooling on the other aspects of the car that aren't unique. So yeah, no, it makes perfect sense for Mazda to do it, and they've made it from a design standpoint, at least the exterior design, they've made it distinct enough that it gives customers two very distinct options, very cars with very similar traits, but two very distinct design options to choose from. And they're priced almost identically. They both start at $25,000. And the 120, the Abarth that I'm driving is just over 34 delivered, but it's loaded with pretty much everything. But it's a fabulous little car. I love this thing.
The black hood though.
It does not. This one does not have the black hood.
Right.
That's available as an option.
So it's I've noticed that when people drive Fiats like the 500 Abarth, they start speaking with it's the Abarth, and it's so no, it's not white, it's Bianco. They start
Blanco.
Is it Blanco?
Yeah, it's an L, not an I.
I thought it's Bianco in Italian. What do I know? I don't speak Italian. Yeah, actually, I'm not driving anything nearly as exotic.
So what did you have this week?
I've got the GMC. I almost said Chevrolet. I got the GMC Canyon Denali. This truck presents a problem in my mind. It's very much better. I like it a lot more than its direct competitor, which is the Tacoma. It's a nicer truck. It's smoother. It feels more solid. It's quieter. It's just a nicer place to be, and it's more comfortable. But it still has some of those shortcomings. You sit lower to the floor. It's a little bit cramped. It's not as space efficient as you might expect, because on the outside, it's not exactly a compact pickup. I think it's about the size of a regular pickup from the 90s. On the outside, they're not tiny anymore.
The main difference is it's narrower than those trucks were.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not as wide. Do you have the crew cab or the regular semi-extended cab?
It's got 4 doors, so I'm assuming that's the crew cab.
Okay.
Let me pull up the
let me ask: Could an actual human being sit in the back seat? Or is it just a little jump seat, about 6 inches wide?
No, it's got seats, but it's not. They're not terribly comfortable.
Yeah.
Even for my kids who are not that 11 and 9, it's a little tight. That's one of the issues. Is like for the money, because it's the Denali starts at $40,000, starts at $39,200 something. This was optioned up to $44,000, and it's a nice truck, but for that price, you still have seats that are like half power versus full power in front. You're missing out on a few other things, like not all the windows are automatic down. Like these are weird sort of like feature complaints, but on the other hand, when you're paying that much for what's essentially a compact pickup, like it should have everything.
Mm-hmm. How much did you say it was?
44. Yeah.
And that's with the 3.6 liter?
Yes. All of the truck stuff is great. It's really good to drive. It feels really solid. Feels much more solid on the road than the last Tacoma I drove. So the frame is nice and rigid. The engine is very well behaved and smooth and quiet. The transmission's very well matched to it. All the controls are pretty good ergonomically. And it's a good vehicle to drive. The brakes do feel kind of weak. I will say that. And I noticed, I don't know whether it's just the particular pads or the tires or the combination or what, but felt like I should get more stopping when I stepped on this stopping pedal. But it's just, it gets about 23 miles to the gallon, which is just decent for what it is. But, again, you're spending $44,000. You're spending big truck money on a small truck that doesn't really give you anything more in terms of efficiency. You can get a full-size pickup that gets almost that much efficiency. Certainly if you keep your foot out of the engine and you get one of the smaller powertrains in the larger trucks or the lower power, more base model powertrains. And the bed's not all that big, especially with the 4-door. So it's not terribly useful. And trucks are kind of like that anyway. Even the full size pickups, they're kind of like that promise that never really gets fulfilled, right? Like they appear more useful than they actually are, generally. Because like a pickup truck bed is what, 3 yards, maybe 2 yards, something like that of like if you were to get mulch or something, it's just not that much.
Yeah. Like, typical 6-foot bed, I think you can get about 2 yards of stuff in there.
Yeah. So this is much smaller than that. Because it's not a full size truck. So
right, yeah, because the extended cab, the two different cabs, I think both ride on the same wheelbase. So when you go from the shorter cab to the extended cab, you end up with a lot less bed space.
Yeah, and it's a great sort of like occasional use truck in that sense. But if you're going to buy an occasional use truck and you want something that's not giant and something that's relatively efficient, and could maybe serve as a second family car, this is a dumb one to buy.
Yeah.
The smart one to buy for less money is the Honda Ridgeline. It will be bigger in every dimension, probably just as capable in terms of what you can throw at it. I would expect that the Canyon will tow a little bit, with a little bit more authority.
Well, especially if you get the diesel.
Yeah.
If you get the diesel Canyon, then you get better fuel efficiency and considerably more towing capacity too, I think.
Right. But what are you paying for that? That diesel engine is a again, that's a premium on top of something. This is the Canyon Denali, so it's very nice, but it's also it's a premium vehicle. It's the small truck thing. I really wanted to be in the corner of the small truck because I love the idea. It's a beautiful theory. It doesn't really pan out.
I mean, this exemplifies the argument that, for example, Ford was making for years, after when they discontinued the Ranger, fans of the Ranger were saying, come on, we want a smaller pickup truck. Some of us don't want an F-150. And, Ford was saying, it costs us just as much to build a compact truck, or a mid-sized truck as it does to build a full-size truck, and with all the stuff you need on there now, the safety equipment and everything else, it's really not noticeably cheaper to build or to sell, and doesn't really get significantly better fuel economy for the most part.
Nope.
And you end up sacrificing a lot of capability along the way, in terms of whether it's bed space and payload capacity or towing. So for just a little bit more money, you get a lot more capability with the full size truck. And they really stuck to that for the longest time until, GM launched the new Canyon in Colorado, and, they actually sold really well. And then they finally, Ford finally said, okay, fine, we'll build a new Ranger for North America. Cause they had the global Ranger that was sold in other parts of the world where they don't sell F-150s. But now they're bringing that back to North America as well.
Yeah. And, again, it's a wonderful theory, and I'm sure that if you want a pickup truck that fits in your garage, this will definitely fit in most garages, and it's not giant. Like the full size trucks have gotten very big. But the flip side is, you can walk into a dealership and get a very good deal on a Sierra or a Silverado. It may not be Denali trim, but it's going to be nice for the same amount of money that you spend on a Canyon Denali. If you want the diesel in this, it's the Duramax 4-cylinder, and it's an extra $3,000. So you end up spending 47 on roughly the same truck that I've got. It's 44. So it will tow. It'll tow then 7,600 pounds, but a truck that's towing 7,600 pounds, I'd be a little concerned about the brakes and stuff. I don't know that it has the integrated trailer controller. And I'm saying my concern already with the way the brakes felt. Mm-hmm. If you're going to tow 7,600 pounds max, you might want to get a larger truck. It's, make sure you're better within its limits. But
they do have, I'm pretty sure they have trailer sway control, and automatic trailer brake capability on here, when you get the towing package.
That's what it is, because I didn't see it in this one. So they often have that stuff. So
right. So, things like trailer sway control are pretty much standard now on at least on all the domestic pickups. So that'll make sure that the trailer stays behind you, when you're driving down the road. And then, the trailer brake, control is good for when you're going down hills. One thing that, you mentioned the Pilot, in a lot of ways, the Pilot is definitely, I think, a superior vehicle to this one. You've got more room inside.
The Ridgeline or the Pilot?
Sorry, the Ridgeline.
Yeah, that's the same thing, but
yeah.
The Pilot Amino.
Yeah, the Ridgeline is, it's got a lot of neat features, and the fact that they built it off the Pilot platform, so it's not built off a traditional truck platform. You don't have the same max towing capability, but you got a lot of other cool capabilities. Like there's the trunk, in the back end of the Pilot or the Ridgeline bed, that's a lockable storage compartment behind the rear axle, that you can put tools and whatever else into, and it's a bigger, roomier vehicle, the nice cabin. It's going to be interesting to see how this midsize truck, segment plays out over the next few years, once the new Ranger arrives in a couple of years, to see if there's, how long this momentum can last.
Well, and I think there's definitely a market for it. There's people that want it, but it's not so much a practical decision. If you're gonna get a truck that's sort of a weekend warrior truck, is sort of like what I wrap my head around it. Like you commute in it during the week, and then on a weekend you use it for sort of the suburban or exurban domestic tasks, or maybe you put a plow on it in the winter and you use it to plow your driveway and stuff. Yeah, it'll do all that stuff. And if that's what you use it for, it's probably decent enough. I'm not sure I'd want to plow with a Ridgeline, although you can. We talked about that.
I don't think GMC doesn't offer something equivalent to the ZR2 package on the Canyon, do they? Or the Colorado? I don't
know off the top of my head. I didn't go delving too deeply into it.
The ZR2 package on the Colorado is pretty impressive for off-roading. If you like to go off-roading, that is a truck that can really handle the off-road. And it doesn't have the kind of power that you have in, say, Ford's Raptor, the F-150 Raptor. Yeah. But it's also, because it is narrower and smaller, it's actually a lot easier to maneuver, if you're going rock crawling, driving through some canyons and things like that. So, it's got these really trick Multimatic shocks on there with remote reservoirs that, these things are really impressive.
So that's definitely an application where this truck wins for sure. They're going to get to the point of saturating the market with the little trucks.
Yeah. Right now, you basically you've got the GMs, you got the Ranger coming in a couple of years, and the Tacoma, and then there's the Toyota or the Nissan Frontier, which is, about 100 years old.
It's got character.
It's got character. It may or may not get replaced one of these days with something a little more modern. But that one's been around a while.
Yeah, and the Tacoma just got sort of quasi redone. They spun it as an all new truck that was thoroughly revised. It's not all new, and it didn't necessarily have to be all new. That truck has the ability to just outsell everything and have ridiculous resale on it as well.
I was not particularly impressed with the Tacoma when I drove it last summer, though.
I have not been impressed with the Tacoma for about a decade. It's just, it feels overpriced. All the materials inside feel cheap. It's loud. It's uncomfortable. I don't like that Tacoma splay leg seating position. The engine was weak until the latest, model year where it's just gotten a lot better. But still, it's just I don't know.
The suspension tuning on the TRD that I drove last year was pretty bad.
Yeah, it's only sort of it's okay. It's definitely consistent. It's a Tacoma, and so maybe that's what that customer wants. But I much preferred the GMC. I think, you know, if that's the kind of truck you're looking for and you don't want to get the crap beat out of you every time you drive it, definitely look at the Canyon and the Colorado. They're comfy and smooth and quiet and all the things that the big GMC trucks are. And I like the GM trucks probably more than the Ram or the Ford. And that holds with this too.
If you had to choose between the Canyon and a Ridgeline, which would you take?
Ridgeline. For my life, okay. The Ridgeline makes more sense. It's just it's more roomy, so I can get the kids and the dog in it, and you know the bed is larger, and I don't really tow, and so for what I would do, the Ridgeline is more sensible.
Yeah, and I think the Ridgeline it'll still tow, I think 5,000 pounds.
Yeah,
which is, you know, it's pretty reasonable. I mean, that's, you know, for a small boat, you know, it can handle that, or a small, you know, smaller mid-sized trailer. It's fine with that. So,
yeah. And it's just, it's nice. It's nicely equipped inside and stuff. And, you know, it's going to come in a little cheaper than this. The problem is you're not going to get the sort of rebates and stuff because Hondas don't have a problem selling. So
that's right.
So yeah, let's move on to some stuff.
Okay.
I threw just a couple of links in this week because we've got an interview that we can get to later on, which dovetails really nicely with, talking about the Canyon and some questions that we got. But the first thing I thought that sort of popped up was Volkswagen has sort of respun their advertising. They're really trying hard after their diesel scandal to make everybody forget that they were the company that made diesels that were way dirtier than they said they were. And they're coming out, you know, and Volkswagen is always, they're sort of like the Budweiser of car advertising, right? You know that they're going to do something clever. And we saw the Love Bug ad, which is how the family grows. And then building on that, they just released another one that it really sort of tells a story about a grandmother taking, I think, her husband's ashes to spread them like across the country to introduce the Atlas. And, you know, being a marketing advertising guy, it caught my attention a little bit because so much car advertising is, you know, think about what Dodge does. All they want to do is just be badasses. They just, like, our cars are jerks. You know, so powerful.
Pretty much.
And that kind of sells it short because they're, you know, that's not the only image that you want to portray because they're just, you know, they're decent enough vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they are good vehicles, and you know, it's you don't want to typecast yourself in that way because that's going to inherently limit your market, your potential addressable market. And I think, you know, it's interesting what VW is doing here with this new series of ads, you know, really trying to appeal to the family, you know, and you know, the Atlas is probably the most important vehicle that Volkswagen has perhaps ever introduced in the North American market, certainly in the last 20 years.
Well, they're very late to the game too. So the Atlas is if I'm sure that nobody listening doesn't know, but it's their big 3-row crossover. It's built for the American market. I don't think they're really planning on selling too many of these in Europe and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a vehicle that's tailored for what people are buying now. They didn't really have anything other than, you know, maybe the Audi Q7, but that's, again, it's not Volkswagen, it's Audi.
Yeah, it's a more, you know, it's a considerably more expensive, more premium vehicle, and even the Touareg, you know, which was their mid-size SUV. It was their bigger SUV until the Atlas showed up. You know, was also a pretty expensive vehicle. You know, it was definitely, you know, a more premium priced. You know, it was priced more closer to what an Audi is, and the Touareg is sticking around even with the Atlas. And you know, it's a little smaller than the Atlas, but it will be the upscale model to the Atlas, which is going to be the more mainstream family model.
Can I admit that I forgot about the Touareg? Is that okay?
Well, I think most people have at this point.
Yeah, so I think they're doing with the Atlas what they did with the Passat and the Jetta. They sort of made specific ones for this market, and they took some of the cost out. They're still good, but I would expect to see the same sort of real price tailoring in the Atlas that I've seen in the Passat and the Jetta. Again, not bad, just right for this market. And so to launch it, they're not going after sort of the car makers have also forgotten how to market, or they've lost their way, because they're having this real struggle between who's actually buying the cars, how to speak to the people that they want to be buying their cars eventually when they have money, maybe once their student debt is paid off in 35 years. So, there's always that, a brand like Volkswagen with the Beetle, right? When they launched the new Beetle, it was about fun. And even, back in the 90s, they were selling Jettas and Golfs with, skis and bikes and stuff. They had the Jetta Trek and the Golf K2 and all those things. They
were lifestyle vehicles.
Now they don't, and especially with the Atlas, like, you're selling it to, it's a family vehicle. So telling that all encompassing family story and sort of showing it, I think it's an interesting turn on it. And so it caught my eye, and they've been playing the hell out of it. So I'm sure that it's been seen by a lot of folks as well. And I
wouldn't know about that. I don't see ads.
Yeah. Well,
but, I mean, this, the midsize and, to larger, 3-row SUV, is the modern family car. This is the replacement for the classic, Dodge Monaco, Ford Country Squire station wagons, those really big family station wagons.
I really liked the Monaco. One of my earliest memories is from nursery school, and it was one of those early 70s fuselage Chrysler wagons with the little jump seat in the back, and just I remember the Plymouth emblem on the hubcap, and I did not know what it was, but it stood out. Yeah. Okay. My story.
In high school, my auto shop teacher had a 71 Monaco, a dark brown one that we used to take for runs to the scrapyard to buy parts for the cars we were working on.
Did it have a 383, 440?
Actually, it was a 318.
318. Oh, that's a lot of car for a 318.
Yeah, it struggles going up hills. But getting back to the Atlas, this thing is sized, right in the heart of, the larger mainstream crossover class. It's virtually the same size. It's actually exactly the same length as a Ford Explorer, and a couple inches shorter than the Chevy Traverse. And the wheelbase falls in between those two, so, this should be ideally sized for what the American market wants right now, at least, for family vehicles, since they, for reasons that escape me, seem to have this aversion to minivans these days. So they've certainly sized it in the right segment, and, it's going to be built in Chattanooga. So because it's primarily for the North American market, as you said, it's not for Europe. So it's going to be interesting to see how this ad campaign plays out, to see if they really can start to attract some new kinds of customers into Volkswagen showrooms.
Yeah, and it's just so interesting too to watch how they're telling the story, kind of a multifaceted way of. This is they're offering a long warranty on it, which is kind of they're using that as a selling point. Like, look, the whole family's going to be able to get through this thing before the warranty runs out. That's kind of an interesting point. And just even the story about casting it, they're really trying hard to just take everybody's mind, or put everybody's mind on the story they want to tell. Where they walk the streets of New York and got a old Irish actress to to play the part. Of the grandma. So,
well, like you said, this is the second in a series of ads they're doing. The first one came out a few weeks ago. It was titled Love Bug. And it's kind of an ongoing narrative. Where Love Bug starts off with a young couple, and shows the growing family as they get some kids and they're, growing up into larger and larger VWs. And, it goes from a Beetle to a Jetta to a Tiguan, and now, you've got this extended family with grandma and the kids and the couple, all packed into this Atlas, and I'll be curious to see what they do next.
All listening to Simon and Garfunkel. What is it? America. That was the one sort of bad spot. It was enough, just enough with the, I don't know. I didn't like it. I didn't like the music choice. When it's my turn to do a VW ad, it's going to be different. I don't know. I think that's all we have to say about that one. We should just move on.
Okay.
Speaking about, there's been a lot of talk about ride hailing and Uber. Uber in particular has been in the news. I actually was listening to Freakonomics radio over the weekend, their show, and they had I think it was just like an hour devoted to Uber, talking about, because one of the guys from Freakonomics, Stephen Levitt, so not the main host, but Levitt, the economist, was talking about how he had for years wanted to model a demand curve, and there's no such thing as a natural demand curve, I guess, out there. I'm not quite sure what a demand curve is because I'm not an economist, but Uber presented him the opportunity to model one directly, and they provided their data. And I'm just listening to this whole thing kind of skeptically, like, wow, this seems like almost a love letter to Uber in a lot of ways. They didn't really talk about the scandal that surrounds the company and how if they're sort of shooting themselves in their own foot, because at the core of what Uber does and what ride hailing does is there's this very natural turn toward a new way of, people getting rides and providing mobility. And there's all kinds of data because it's an app that's used that you can use to really fine tune. You can find where exactly the price should be. They talked about that. I believe consumer surplus is like the amount of money that you will spend on it, to find the breaking point so you can accurately price your thing to the market, which seems a little sketchy. Like,
well, there's, basic, economics 101, you learn about supply and demand curves, and the supply curve, where, prices on prices on the y-axis and volume is on the x-axis. And, as the price goes up, you're going to have increasing supply. So supply is rising up to the right, and, demand starts high at low price, and declines as you increase the price. And, where those two cross is what should be the ideal price point, where supply exactly meets demand. And that's,
it's a dynamic thing too, though, right? Like, so that's where surge pricing comes in. That's the feedback mechanism for Uber to try to match supply with demand. And when demand starts to outstrip supply, then they've got to crank the price up to bring demand back down. Right. Right.
Because, especially for products, like say mobility services, the natural demand, is going to vary based on, more than just price. You've got other factors like, for example, weather conditions or traffic and other things. And so when it's hard to come up with one pricing model that includes all of those. But if you, what Uber did with the whole concept, with the surge pricing, the dynamic pricing, is try to match the price to the, for both the supply, from the supply of drivers to the demand as far as passengers go, and get enough as the price goes up, you get more drivers coming in, that increases the supply. And then, at the same time, the demand is going to come down, and there's going to be hopefully a point where they coincide, and that's where the price is going to be set. But, I think, where Uber, perhaps went wrong with that, with the surge pricing is, I think they got a little greedy, as far as how much they surged it, and that pissed off a lot of people. So, you have to take that, maybe a little more gradually, but that, in principle, what Uber was trying to do was great, and, certainly the taxi industry that they were disrupting, certainly deserved to be disrupted. There was no complaint. I don't think anybody was going to complain about that except for the people that overpaid for taxi medallions in places like New York City and Chicago
and Boston
and, other big cities.
They're all very upset.
Yeah. Well, the price of medallions in New York, for example, has plummeted. I think it's, they were going for $1 million a piece, just a few years ago. And now I think they're down close to 300,000.
But this is one of the points that you make. You did a post for Forbes, and while there's been successful disruption and they've certainly, found a lot of consumer acceptance and adoption, you're not so keen on Uber, Lyft, Didi, other ride-hailing services actually sticking around as a sustainable business model.
Right. Because the way that they have been able to grow their business so far is they've essentially been dumping the service. Right. They've been offering the service to customers, trying to draw in customers by offering the service at a price point that is below the cost of doing business. And when they talk about social networks, there's like Facebook and Twitter and so on, there's this idea of the network effect. And, for a social network to really be viable, it needs to have enough people using it so that, you can get, enough of a community in there that it becomes self-sustaining. Well, with services like mobility services, like on-demand mobility services, the network effect is actually not with the users, because with a social network, when you have once all your friends are on a social network, then there's a high switching cost if you want to go to a different social network, because now you have to try and convince all your friends to come along with you, and if they all like being on Facebook and they don't want to go to Google Plus, then basically Google Plus is gonna fail. And with mobility services, it's kind of the opposite. The switching cost for the users is actually virtually zero. There's no impact to the user to switch from Uber to Lyft to Get, or to any number of other services. All you have to do is load the app and away you go. Where you need the network effect for those kinds of services is for the drivers. You have to have a sufficient pool of drivers so that the waiting time for the users when somebody wants a ride is short enough that they're not going to make that switch. And in order to maintain that network of drivers, they've had these companies have had to pay them more than what it costs to run the service, and at the same time charge fares to riders that are below the cost. And so that's why you get companies like Uber losing $3 billion last year on revenues of I think somewhere between 9 and 10 billion. So I mean, they had huge losses, even though they haven't had to actually spend any money on any vehicles or anything like that. All the vehicles, the cost of the vehicles and fuel and maintaining those vehicles is all borne by the drivers. So, it's not really a sustainable business model. And then once, they want to go to autonomous vehicles so they can get rid of the drivers, but then they have to start spending tens of billions of dollars a year buying or manufacturing and maintaining these vehicles. And it's not clear that they're going to be positioned to make that transition. Whereas automakers that already have the infrastructure to build vehicles and service them and maintain them, they can easily add the kind of platform that these mobility companies have.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the things that I picked up on too, is that everybody's still very optimistic about autonomous vehicles solving things. They talk about the density on the roads, where if these vehicles can follow each other very closely, you can get more cars in, and because they all talk to each other, and they're not the computers are driving, so they're not going to crash into each other, right? Well, I think that's kind of high, right? Well, I don't think that's not realistic. There's going to be issues, and to say that within the next 5 years, we're going to have, basically road trains of self-driving cars that just follow each other real closely, and you can read your paper while you ride along. I don't know, maybe on a test basis, but I don't think that's going to happen on a actual like large scale. And with Uber too, they can lose money for a while because they got about 65 billion just sitting around. But is their end game?
Well, they don't actually have that much cash.
Well,
they have a valuation of
their valuation,
65 billion. But
that's
even that, is based on the money that they've raised from their investors. But they've, there's also, because they haven't gone public yet, you can't just go and buy shares of Uber, like any other public company. But there are secondary markets where some of the people that own shares in Uber, whether they're investors or employees of the company, can buy and sell shares to other investors on a more limited basis. And there are recent reports that the price of those shares is now indicating a valuation closer to about $50 billion, in recent weeks compared to 65, which is what it was, towards the end of 2016. So it's dropped quite precipitously because of all these scandals.
It's still absurd, though.
Oh yeah, and I think it's going to go down much, much further before it bottoms out. And I think what's going to ultimately end up happening is at some point it's going to drop low enough that some automaker is going to step in and buy up Uber, to get get the platform, and take over their, the brand equity that they have, even assuming it hasn't been so severely tainted at that point that, nobody wants to use it anymore.
Well, that's the sort of plus and the minus of it, right? They've built a good product. They have seen wide adoption. They have good people working very hard, figuring out a lot of things about what's going on, but they also have this really seamy underbelly that's just seems to go off in all directions, with just no end to these terrible stories either. So, there's that good and bad side of Uber. So either they'll, eventually they'll just sort of wither and die, or they will get bought up. I'm not sure which is which, but ride hailing.
It'll probably get acquired by somebody eventually.
Yeah, I mean, ride hailing on its own, I think, is going to look very different in a few years.
Yeah, well, it's going to be. You talked about having autonomous on demand ride hailing. And interesting. Last week, Waymo announced the launch of their early rider program, and they're going to start it in Phoenix using their fleet of Chrysler Pacificas that they built. And right now they have 100 of those that are on the streets, and they've done a deal with Fiat Chrysler to do another to assemble another 300 to add to their fleet. And so what they're doing is they're now starting. They've been doing development on the core technology of driving, self-driving vehicles, and now they're moving on to the development of their ride-hailing platform, their mobility platform. And so people can register to participate in this in Phoenix to start with, but I'm sure they'll probably add a couple more cities, probably Austin and maybe Portland or maybe San Francisco over the next few months as they start to gain some experience with this and get more vehicles on the road. But you'll be able to summon the vehicle using an app and have it take you anywhere you want to go.
Yeah, places with perfect weather and roads that are in good shape are not going to have a problem. They're going to see the stuff.
And that's, that's why, even, when you hear companies, talking about launching their autonomous vehicles in 2020, 2021, it's going to be very limited deployments, and, only in places where they can control where they can have a high degree of confidence that the conditions will work well for these vehicles.
And you know what? That's fine. I mean, you move where the food is, right? So if that's what it takes, that's what's going to happen. Another thing you wrote up recently from Forbes was that Delphi is looking to spin off as well.
Yeah, I was actually out in Silicon Valley last week for a couple of days. And while I was out there, Delphi had their first quarter financial results. And at the same time, they announced that, they're going to spin off their powertrain systems business unit, which is like one of the last of their old school businesses, from when they got split off from GM in the late 90s. Their powertrain unit, which makes things like fuel injection systems and alternators and all kinds of other components for engines, is quite a profitable business, and it's still a very large business. But they're going to split that off into a separate company and retain just the autonomous driving and electrical systems and electrical architecture units as their core business going forward.
Why would they do that?
I think, they see the writing on the wall, that, the stuff from in the powertrain unit, it's all for internal combustion engines. And while it's still a good business today, it's not a business that's going to see a whole lot of growth, over the next 10, 20 years. And it's eventually going to start to decline. Overall vehicle sales, are probably pretty close to their peak globally, if not at their peak already.
Well, their sales numbers recently have been discouraging.
Yeah, well, certainly here in North America, they're still growing in China and some other markets, but overall sales are going to start to flatten out globally in the next few years, and then start to go into a decline. And as you get more and more electric vehicles on the road, the demand for the kinds of products that the powertrain systems unit makes is going to also eventually start to decline. So, now is a good time as any to spin that off as a separate business that's still a very profitable business and will be for the foreseeable future. It's just not a business with a lot of growth potential. And the business that remains, on the other hand, things like, communications and vehicle networking and autonomous systems, that's a business that's actually got a lot of growth potential. And that's what the stock market likes. So you're probably going to see the value of that part of the company increase pretty significantly over the next few years. Potentially even be acquired by somebody like, say Intel.
But is there any there? That's, if everybody rushes to fill that void, you wind up, maybe at a certain point now it's highly valued, but once you get too many players in there, then naturally you've got to thin the herd too. So are they sort of running headlong to their own death? While spinning off their buggy whip, well,
not necessarily, because they're not spinning off everything that is highly profitable. One of the parts that's staying in that business unit is their electrical architecture business. So things like wiring harnesses and vehicle networks, all of that is staying with that core business. And wiring harnesses are it doesn't matter if you're using electrons or gasoline or diesel to power your car, the vehicle still needs a wiring harness. As vehicles get more sophisticated, those wiring harnesses also become more sophisticated. And as you start to transition into things like Ethernet networks in the vehicle instead of CAN networks, there's a lot of potential for growth there, for new business there. So even if autonomy takes a long time to come to fruition, there's still a lot of other pieces in that part of the company that probably have more growth potential than the powertrain systems unit.
Yeah. Well, at a certain point, they got to, again, like you were talking about the autonomous, the ride-hailing companies, right? They got to adapt or die. So
absolutely, and that's what they're doing. They're trying to adapt.
So speaking of Delphi, I guess is kind of related. I did an interview this week because not too long ago I had a GMC. I guess it was a Chevy Silverado HD.
It was about a month ago, I think, wasn't it?
So I think so. And it had the new Duramax diesel in it, and I was very impressed with that engine. It's just smooth. It lights off instantly. It's just obviously super powerful because there's no diesel that's just not crushingly powerful now. So I managed to get a little time on the phone with, I'm going to mangle his name. I know it. It's Nicola. It's an Italian name because they actually developed the engine in Europe, where there's a lot more, I guess, diesel expertise. But so it's Nicola Menarini. I think I did okay. But anyway, I spoke with him for about 20 minutes about how they developed the not only the 6.6 Duramax, but just how GM's doing diesel at the moment, especially at a time when other automakers have kind of just stopped to catch their breath. GM doesn't seem to be all that worried that diesel's going to have a problem going forward, and so they're introducing.
So they did development of that big diesel V8 at their Turin engineering center?
Yes.
I didn't know that. I thought they were only doing the smaller diesels over there.
No. So one of the interesting things he pointed out was that while you can swap out the engine, so you've got like the 2.8, right, in the smaller trucks. You've got the big 6.6. You've got the diesel in the Cruise. The command and control, the system that runs the engine is the same. Same basic system. The software obviously changes, but they developed that system in-house.
You can scale it up to however many cylinders you've got in the vehicle.
Yeah, and they're not buying it from someone. Like in the past, GM has partnered with other companies, and obviously, you've got Ford that was tied up with Navistar for a while, and you've got, what is it, Cummins still over at Ram.
They use the Cummins 6-cylinder and the big Ram HDs, and then they use the VM Motori and the 1500s. And then Nissan uses the Cummins diesel V8 and the Titan.
Right, and that was supposed to be a Ram engine at some point, right?
It was originally targeted for Ram. They were going to use that in the 1500.
But the 6.6 Duramax is actually a really interesting engine. It's 4 valves per cylinder, which I didn't realize, still with a push rod valve train. So anyway, we'll cover it all in the interview. Listen to the interview, and then we can come back and we will answer a question. We had at least one question, so listen to that now, and then we'll come back.
Yeah, good to go.
The first thing we should do is just make sure I have your name and title, Nicola. What exactly it is you do there in Torino?
Yeah, I am. My name is Nicola Menarini. I'm working part of the GM GPS Global Propulsion System diesel team, and in Torino it's our home room for diesel development. And I am the global chief engineer and program manager for the Duramax, appointed as of calendar year 17, and of the XLDE, which is the engine that we have on the midsize truck in the US and many other countries in the world, and in the US on the G-Van, on the Chevy and GMC van.
And you have...
So that's my job.
And you have deep diesel experience. I was looking through your CV. You go back quite a ways with VM Motori, and so...
Yes.
It seems like a natural fit for the new Duramax, and that's what I wanted to talk about is the new 2017 6.6 liter Duramax that is available in the trucks this year. Because I recently drove a Silverado 2500 HD with the engine, and I was very impressed with it. Even if you don't know much about diesels or engines in general, I thought the engine was noticeably better than the previous Duramax diesel. So let's start at the beginning, I guess. It's pretty much an all-new engine. Why did it have to be redesigned so thoroughly?
Well, first of all, very happy to hear that you drove it and that you found the improvement that we all have been working to achieve. So that's good. We basically in an evolution of an engine, which is a lifetime normally above 10 years, there are big appointments and small appointments. There's never the final engine until it's replaced for something else. And the 17 was a big appointment. There are, during the evolution, during the life of an engine, you have continuous upgrades, changing improvements, and sometimes they are big. And this is the case for our 17 engine. Our 17 engine was developed to combine features to really move ahead compared to what we had until 16. And we combined, as I hope you experienced, improvement in overall performance, which is torque and power, it's NVH, and also looking to the future and to the present, I would say upgrading the engine for emission compliance and current emission compliance, and be ready with the hardware for future emission compliance. So as a combination, we took this big step to do the 17. You may have seen it's still a V8 of the same displacement, but we have a lot of new components, a lot of new parts that, of course, have been developed to achieve all these results. So we have new crankshafts, new piston, much reinforced block, cylinder head to improve breathing and emission performance, a totally new injection system, and in addition to that, a component which is not installed on the engine, but is the heart of the engine, is the control unit. So we now have in all the Silverado and Sierra vehicles with the Duramax, a controller, an ECM, control module, which is designed by GM, developed by GM, and we do have the ownership of both the hardware and software. This is key for our strategy. We own the software, we know what we do, we know what we tell to the engine to do. It's completely developed in General Motors, good portion in Torino, some portion in the US for the diesel control portion. So it was really a combination of hardware, software, and this is why we say we have this product that looks similar to what we had before, but in terms of performance and in general, performance that can be detected by the customer, power, torque, NVH, and other performances, which is emission compliance, which are mandatory, which are legal requirements. It's a real step forward.
Yeah, certainly from a driving perspective, the torque and horsepower and NVH are all noticeably better. Is it a new development to have the controller developed in-house? Would you previously be working with another partner to develop the software and the control system?
It was a strategic decision inside the GM long ago to really become independent and being able to create the brain of our engines inside. Traditionally, not many vehicle manufacturers that have diesel engines with totally integrated and developed by homeroom. They use controllers that you can buy from a partner, a supplier. We took this decision long ago, and as of today, all the diesel engines that GM is producing and selling around the world have a controller which is developed by GM people. It gives us a lot of flexibility, a lot of knowledge, a lot of control on what we do, on all our, and synergy as well. Because, for example, if you look to what's available in the US, for example, now you have seen for sure the Cruise is launched with the diesel engine, and the Colorado Canyon are available as of a little more than a year ago, a year and a half. They use exactly the same control unit with different calibration, but exactly the same unit. So we are achieving synergy as well.
So you get some of that economy of scale. You put the work in and use it across the line. That's
yes, it's economy of scale in hardware, meaning that we multiply economy of scale because we buy many of exactly the same controller, and the economy of scale of developing the functions, which are common and differently calibrated, of course, but common across the diesel engines and diesel vehicle range.
And so how did you and the team set goals for this new Duramax? Did you pick the torque or fuel efficiency numbers that you wanted and then work to meet them, or was it a case of keeping up with or outdoing the competition, or all of those?
Okay, provided that I'm joining the team recently, but of course I had an extended discussion with the team. It's a combination of everything, okay? Because it's a combination. You have to keep up with competition. We're basically pretty close to competition, to be honest. There's the numbers, the difference in numbers does not even justify any difference in performance. We're all about the same, okay, very much in general. And I'm not sure how long the race to power and torque will go on. But of course, we felt that there was a need of an upgrade to the engine. The power increase is nearly 50 horsepower, which is significant on an engine like this. The torque even more. So they were targeted the beginning of the program a few years ago, and then achieved.
Well, the results are certainly pleasing from a user perspective. How difficult was it to achieve those results that you have?
It was extremely difficult. We cannot deny that it was. The development was not nice and smooth. We had a few hiccups during the development. They were, fixed quickly on time in order to not losing time. But it was extremely challenging on all aspects.
Is there? Okay. Go ahead.
No, I mean it's mechanically challenging. It is the MVH was particularly challenging. We have several acoustic pads here and there in the engine to make it quieter than the predecessor. It went okay, but it required a lot of 724 kind of approach from most of the team members. Sure.
Yeah, and certainly with the diesel, and especially with modern injection systems that just make a lot of noise, the ability to bring that noise down. Just reading about the two-piece oil pan that had to be created to damp some of the vibration and resonance and all of the other measures that had to be taken on the top of the engine. Would you say that NVH was the most difficult issue to solve, or is there anything in particular that really you had to work extra hard to achieve or to fix as you were developing the engine?
I would say NVH was an example. It was particularly the critical, the development also of the maximum power. The maximum power, and with this level of maximum power is not a problem. The problem is guaranteeing a full durability and reliability at this level of power. You can do power very easily, and combining with emission performance. NVH was particularly difficult. As I told you, the Duramax the 17 Duramax was a big appointment. But we have others that are coming. So this is not the end of the Duramax development.
Sure.
There are many interesting things that are coming in the next model years. Not big steps as you experienced on 17, but we call it the continuous improvement, and this is what we are doing.
Sure. They build on each other. One of the most noticeable things to me was how quickly this engine starts. It seems like a small thing, but diesels, even modern ones, you generally have that slight delay to heat the glow plugs, especially if it's a cold start in a low temperature. I didn't notice that with this engine. It started very quickly, even in the cold. How did you manage that, especially with the limited capacity of a 12-volt electrical system? I'm sure it's easier to get the glow plug system working better if we were to go to a 48-volt system that's coming but not here yet.
There is a trick, and it's very, very, very simple to explain, I would say. All the diesels that GM is offering in potentially cold markets, even if the global warming is helping a little bit, we use ceramic glow plugs. And the ceramic glow plugs can achieve a higher tip temperature. If I remember correctly, we're in the area of 1200 degrees C in just 1 second or so. And so we basically have shortened up the glowing time to almost nothing, and the startability, the quality of the start is also very good. Are more expensive, much more delicate, because we handle ceramics. So, you know what? If a teacup is falling on the ground, ceramic made is broken. So we have to handle very properly, but the performance is great. And we have it also on the cruise and on the midsize truck.
There's the economy of scale again. And, I also didn't realize it's a 4-valve per cylinder engine, but it's still pushrod based with its valve train. Why was that? Just because of the basic architecture you were working with, you were starting with? Why not an overhead cam design?
That's a great question. And as an engineer, one would like, of course, a 4-cam engine as an V8 configuration, because it looks like it's the most modern technology, etc. But we really didn't find a justification to drastically review even the valve train system, which works very, very well. And so we have improved what we have rather than tearing apart all the engine design, even in the valve train area. It's true, we have a push rod engine with a single cam in the middle of the V, and still also mechanical tappets. However, what we have done is to ensure that we do not have a deterioration or a change in the valve lash during the engine expected lifetime. So not necessarily this will stay for a far future. We recognize that we could, it's something we are potentially thinking for a far future, not in the next month, I would say. But frankly speaking, the changes, we prioritized the changes in the 17 to what was really needed in order to improve the engine performance. And the combustion system that we have today with this system is really good.
Sure. And
of course, it is. If you look to the smoke emission of the engine, clearly we do have the DPF, so there's no visible smoke at all ever. But assuming you remove the DPF, the engine has no smoke also, because the raw emission, the raw soot emission, is really low, and so it's okay, and we decided to keep it as is.
Well, and certainly for packaging, the pushrod is an elegant solution, and it's I'm assuming it's that engineering decision making, the balance. There's more friction with the pushrod valve train, but it's not an engine that because it's a diesel, it's not doing high RPM. And I noticed the actual layout. I was looking at the cutaway illustration by Dave Kimball. The geometry, the push rods they're all in a line. It's pretty standard to what we've expected. It's not something like the old the Chrysler Hemi with the the push rods that operate backwards and things like that. So it's still very elegant packaging.
Yeah, and first of all, I'd like it's true that the the friction could be improved, but we have tappets with use a roller. So we have no sliding contact, we have a rolling contact. And we had also to overcome to ensure that we do not have 32 rods, but only into brackets 16.
It's very clever. I was impressed. I want to see that on a gasoline V8.
Well, yeah, the gasoline V8, as you correctly said, probably to take care of higher RPM, and then the push rod may be a little bit more questionable. But we have a 3,000 max power RPM, and then what we have is really okay. Plus, as I told you, we've been able to avoid any lash adjustment for the engine lifetime. It would be very difficult to do under a bonnet of a Silverado or Sierra.
Sure.
So,
so we'll stay with the top end of the engine for my next question.
Yeah.
The cylinder heads themselves, they're aluminum alloy, which I was also surprised by. That's common for gasoline engines, but is that still rare for a diesel?
No, it's completely common.
Oh, it is.
No. Okay. In the automotive field, anywhere, there's no diesel with cast iron head anymore. None.
Okay, so
they're all aluminum. And the trick, even here, the trick is controlling the way the coolant is cooling the aluminum and ensuring that you have a proper coolant flow into the critical areas. You have to ensure that the breathing. When you switch off the engine, you have to also to ensure that we have natural siphon circulation of the coolant, so that we don't have a vapor trapped into cylinder head, which could create an unexpected temperature increase. So, and of course, the structural design of the cylinder heads. But aluminum is very common. You have to select the right alloy, because aluminum is a lot. There are many variants. There are some that are specifically developed for high-performance automotive engines, and they perform very well. The cast iron cylinder head is, in theory, stronger, but at the end of the day, with much less heat transfer capacity.
Oh, so it's actually less efficient.
There's pros and cons.
Yeah. My last question that I wanted to sort of cover is kind of a big one. But
okay.
Why make such an investment in diesel? Obviously a lot of time went into developing the new engine, and it's certainly not cheap to build or to buy, for that matter. I know, being a global automaker, diesel in other markets is more popular than it is in the North American market. But is the demand of heavy-duty pickups with diesel strong enough to justify it? And again, with the emissions systems that need to be on it too, and the increased scrutiny now because of what happened with Volkswagen and the emissions there, it seems like it's a tough spot, and I could easily see an automaker saying, you know what, we don't want to get involved in that. That's a mess. So why invest so heavily?
When the game gets tough, and you give me the second portion of the answer of this short phrase. Tough play.
Sure. Right.
Okay, so yes, we have a demand. Yes, our customers like the Duramax, like the torque, like the towing capability and exhaust braking feature going downhill for the big towers. We have a demand which is not going down for sure, eventually the opposite. And we know what to do. The scrutiny, great. The more the scrutiny is, the better it is. We've not been hit by anything severe like others. We have, as GM, as you certainly know, a complete transparency with CARB and EPA. We disclose everything to them. Even before the scandal, GM was disclosing everything we do on the engines and asking opinions, support, etc. So we are we are okay. We went through the certification. Actually, the Colorado Canyon was the next vehicle after the VW scandal, which was knocking at the door of EPA in Ann Arbor. And they opened the door and said, you want a certified diesel? Come, let me see. And it was okay.
Yeah, well,
it was okay.
And especially if you're designing the engine to have, even without DPF, to have low smoke and soot emissions, that just reduces its need for refills of DPF. So it actually, I can see that approach being, try to get it as clean as possible, and then add the SCR, the catalytic reduction and everything onto it. So
there are new trends in the automotive world in the US and anywhere else. But the diesel is, I think you heard recently our VP, Ben Nicholson, saying the diesel is still the most efficient way to transform the energy into the fuel into work. And we cannot deny it. So if we have a race against producing CO2, the diesel is a solution. We need to continue developing the way we control the emission, not much of the smoke, but the NOx, which we control efficiently with the SCR, with the depth injection. And so there's a future, we believe, for the diesel. There's a future of all the powertrain, the propulsion systems. Have to find the right application, and in this case, on the full-size truck, we see that the customer like it, and we want to continue enhancing it to have customers even more happy in the future.
Yeah, well, certainly my week with it was great. I kept looking for things to tow, and I didn't actually find any, but I was a little disappointed because it certainly is a very capable truck, very powerful, very refined. So. Thank you very much for taking some time to speak with me about the new engine, and I look forward to seeing more diesels from GM in the future.
Sure. Thank you very much for this interview. I was very glad to attend, and maybe we can talk again in future. Whenever you want.
Anytime you want to talk engines, you have my number. You give me a call.
Yeah, okay. We'll find a way.
Yeah, because they originally designed the 6.6 with Isuzu.
Really?
Yeah, they developed that engine with Isuzu, like back in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s.
I think really the only thing left on that engine that was from the original design was like the block and the bore spacing.
Yeah. Well, the plant where they make those in Dayton was originally a joint venture with Isuzu. It was like D-Max Incorporated. So it was a GM Isuzu joint venture. And then when they started to pull away from Isuzu, GM eventually took over that whole joint venture, and it became a GM full GM subsidiary. And then so I didn't realize that they had moved some of the engineering of that over to Italy.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where that's where the talent is. Nicola has a lot of background. He actually worked for VM Motori for a span of years as well. So, you go where the talent is, and that's the benefit of being a global automaker.
And actually, that facility is one of the things that GM is keeping, even after they sell off Opel and Vauxhall to PSA.
Well, good. They can make more cool engines. It's a neat engine. I was looking at the Dave Kimball, he's a really famous artist. He does all the cutaways, and so he drew a cutaway of the new Duramax. It's just a cool drawing to look at. Just to look at the
I've got one of his cutaways here on my wall in my office of the LS9, the ZR1 engine from 2007.
Yeah.
I actually met him a few weeks ago at Cars and Coffee here in Birmingham, and he lives in Texas, but he's up here for a couple of months working on a project for an unnamed automaker. I was
gonna say, which he can probably not talk about.
No,
I remember when what year was it? Was it 94 when the LT1 came out? 93? I forget.
Yeah, I think it was 93 or 94.
That was when I became aware of him as an artist, and just because he did a cutaway of the LT1, and I think it was a big fold out that was in Carcraft or something, and I remember staring at it going, wow, that's really neat. How do you draw like that? Very distinctive style.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we had a question actually.
Yeah. So Slawomir wrote in to ask about diesel particulate filters, the particulate filter is the thing on modern diesel engines that has eliminated the smoke that used to be characteristic of all diesel engines, which that black smoke, that thick black smoke, is actually particulate matter. It's little chunks of it's not actually unburned fuel. It's part of the combustion process in a diesel engine. Produces a particulate matter, and you can get some in a gasoline engine as well, but it's usually smaller diameter particles. But what our listener asked about is the DPF kind of cheating in diesel cars. As far as I know, DPF is collecting and accumulating some debris which cannot be burned in the engine, and later on burning all those deposits with the help of some additional fuel. So this helps to clean all those fumes, leaving the exhaust pipe, at least during the time between the two cleanings, or in other words, between two regens of the DPF. But during ongoing regen and cleaning of DPF, the exhaust fumes seem not to be so really clean, aren't they? So is this some kind of cheating? Because not all the time are exhaust fumes clear and nice as they may show. The way that the particulate filter works is it's actually got a ceramic core inside the filter that's porous, and there's a catalyst on there, and the exhaust fumes as they from the diesel engine as they flow through the particulate filter, this core captures the particles, which on modern diesel engines are typically somewhere between 2.5 and 10 microns in diameter. So they're pretty small, but when you have a lot of them, it makes that black soot that you associate with diesels. And so the filter captures these, and over time it eventually gets filled up and it can't capture anymore. And so what happens at that point is it has to go through a regeneration phase. And the particulate matter is, like I say, is actually a byproduct of the diesel combustion process, or actually any hydrocarbon fuel combustion process. You get some degree of particulate matter produced. And so its chemical composition is actually something different. So what happens is the particulate filter is typically sized so that it needs regeneration about every 500 or 600 miles. And when that happens, the engine switches from its normal leaner combustion cycle to a richer air fuel mixture. And so what happens is now when you get extra fuel going through the particulate filter, that unburned fuel coming from the engine going through the particulate filter, you get a new kind of reaction that's taking place with the catalyst in the particulate filter that then converts the particulates into
much smaller particulates.
Well, yeah, smaller particulates, but it also converts some of it to CO2 and to
NOx,
water, and some of it to NOx, but mostly CO2 and water is
that's
the
right. So
byproduct.
Diesels have much lower NOx, right? It's their CO2 that's the problem.
No, it's the other way around. Okay. They have lower CO2 and more NOx production, and the NOx typically happens at higher combustion temperatures. So, what they've tried to do with modern diesels is keep the combustion temperatures down to minimize the NOx, and then they use exhaust after treatment as well, which is where Volkswagen got into trouble. The problem there was not with the particulates; their problem was with the NOx, because they decided to use a NOx trap to capture the NOx, and again do a similar kind of conversion. It's basically a catalytic converter but it wasn't capturing it. It didn't have enough capacity to capture as much NOx as it was supposed to. So the particulate filter, when it's doing its regeneration cycle, what happens is you get a little bit higher fuel consumption for a short period of time. But as far as we know, it's not actually cheating. They're to the best of our knowledge, and we've seen no evidence that anybody is actually done any sort of nefarious stuff with the way they're controlling the air fuel mixture. The thing is with the particulate filter, if they were cheating, you would know it. With NOx, because it's colorless and odorless, you can't tell when an engine's producing too much NOx. You can tell if the particulate filter is not doing its job because you'll see that black soot, that black sooty smoke. So as I said, as far as we know, nobody's been cheating with the DPF. And in fact, the particulate filters are now starting to migrate over to some modern gasoline engines, because one of the byproducts of direct injected engines is you do get extra particulate emissions during cold start, right? Because you're spraying fuel directly into the cold cylinder, and some of it, when it hits the cold cylinder walls, it liquefies again, and then you do get some extra particulate emissions.
That's what they light off the catalytic converter with, right? Like that's it's.
You can't really light off the catalytic converter with the particulates.
With the raw fuel. I mean, doesn't it run a little ridge to light off the cat and then?
It's a little more complicated than that.
You just you have to go into all the nuance. I'm trying to oversimplify.
But starting this year, some manufacturers are starting to put particulate filters on their gasoline direct injected engines. Mercedes is doing it on some of their new engines this year, and there's some new emission standards that are being phased in Europe this year, and then from 2018 here in North America. And that's why there's two different approaches that manufacturers are taking to that. One is with direct injected engines. One is using the particulate filters, and then the other approach is what Ford is doing, where they're using dual fuel injection, where they're putting port fuel injection and direct injection on the engines. And so in the phases where the DI is likely to produce more particulates, they're actually using more of the port fuel injection at that stage. So that's helping them to control their particulates.
Yeah, well, that was one of the issues with the HCCI engines too, right? Was the transient NOx under certain conditions it would get too high, much higher than a regular gasoline engine. So
yeah, it can do that.
Wonder if that's going to be the key to actually seeing that stuff on the road. One of the keys.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever see HCCI engines, although manufacturers are still working on them, and they might show up eventually.
They're so cool.
Oh, I know. It's a neat idea.
That and rotary engines.
They're just really hard to control.
Yeah, also really hard to control.
Yeah. Well, the rotary engines are easier to control, and especially if you do it in an application like what Mazda recently patented for a range extender for an EV, where you can run it at, basically constant speed. And what they, in their patent, what they did was they can monitor, using a crank position sensor, they know where the rotors are. And so they can, when they shut it off, they can stop it. So it actually blocks off the ports. So you can get, basically the whole thing runs cleaner and more efficiently that way. And so it'll be interesting to see if they actually do produce that for those kinds of applications.
It's just such a super neat engine. And it's so compact too. So much power and sort of a compact.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Definitely not as fuel efficient as you might think, but maybe at a constant speed and as a range extender. Fine.
Yeah. With direct injection, in that kind of application, then it could do some interesting things with it.
Yeah. I guess they're used a lot in, or they had been in stuff like pumps and things like that. Just not automotive applications, but just other uses, because they are so lightweight and generally powerful for their size. So.
Right. And that's why they're appealing as a range extender for an EV, because it's so small I mean, imagine, for a car like the Volt, instead of having a 1.5 liter 4-cylinder engine, I mean, you know how big that is, roughly, 2 feet long, 18 to 24 inches long. Now you could replace that with a little rotary engine, that's, maybe the size of, a medium-sized watermelon, to do the same thing, have the same kind of power output, but running at constant speed, just to turn a generator, and then cycling it on and off. And that could actually be a very interesting application.
I would like to see a Volt with a Wankel in it because it would just sound neat.
Yeah. Well, back in around 2008, 2009, a couple of different companies built prototypes. I think FEV and AVL those are both automotive engineering companies. They work with a lot of different car makers. They're doing as engineering consultants. Both of those companies built prototype vehicles with Wankel range extenders.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Someday, that and turbines and just anything different. I like the different. Well, I think we've done a podcast.
I think so too.
Excellent. Well, so that's episode 23. We'll catch everybody soon for number 24.
All righty. Talk to you later.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.